Welcome to episode 15 of the PregActive Podcast, as we talk with one of the most recognized and respected breastfeeding and early parenting experts, Pinky McKay, all about those first newborn weeks. What to expect and how to best prepare for this special time with your newborn baby. Hi, I'm Karen, the founder of PregActive, and through this PregActive podcast, I'm going to help you to feel empowered, informed, and confident through your pregnancy and postpartum journey as we talk all things health, mind, and fitness. So very excited to have Pinky McKay here, who is a lactation consultant and an early parenting expert. And before we get into all the tips and tricks that we're going to talk about, Pinky, for those who don't know you, just give us a bit of an intro into who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm a mum of 5 first up and a grandmother, just in case you didn't think I was that old. I am an international board-certified lactation consultant, which means I can support women with their breastfeeding and antenatally, postnatally, any breastfeeding-related issues and early parenting. I'm also an author of Sleeping Like a Baby, Parenting by Heart, Toddler Tactics, which is all very gentle and about connecting with your baby, and you're the expert about your baby is sort of my philosophy. And you trust yourself around your own baby, and those things. I'm also the creator of Booby Foods, which are foods specifically created for breastfeeding mums too. So yeah,
Aren't you amazing?
about me.
So much. It's so much support, and I think that's so important. Support and guidance, and also just that gentle guidance is really important for mothers, because I remember that phase of being pregnant, but almost, at the end of the pregnancy, and there's it feels like this big step, this big leap into motherhood, and it's such an unknown. It's such a everyone can tell you their things, their opinions, their, whatever. But until you're there and then you settle into your own space, it does feel a bit kind of, I guess, scary in a way. And so to have these sort of resources that you provide are so important. I guess let's talk through today in twofold. One is for pregnant women who are maybe anxious or maybe just are looking for a little bit of guidance in that unknown space. And then we'll also be talking through with mothers who are there, they're already there, they're in the journey, and it might be hard right now. And this can be something that's a bit more reassuring for them. So, what would be, I guess, starting off, if you had a pregnant woman in front of you, what would be some things that you would, I guess, say to her?
Well, about preparing your nest is really important, I think. Preparing for that baby moon, because you are stepping into the unknown. It's the first big step into the unknown for the love of this child, and there'll be lots more unknowns on that journey as your baby grows and changes. And just when you think you've nailed it, that baby will change his pattern. He'll change his feeding pattern. You might have a growth spurt. And I think and so of course if he's having a growth spurt, he'll want to feed a bit more frequently. Just understanding what could happen, but preparing your nest in that, I always say set up a petal roster and imagine that there's a flower with petals around it, and in the center you have a good friend, or you have your sister or someone you know really well, and they can manage this for you. And each petal is the name of a friend who can help support you through this journey. And it might just be that, on Monday, one woman might drop off a meal. On Tuesday, someone might pick up your supermarket shopping, or, fold your washing or whatever, depending where you are right now and how many people are allowed to visit you, what they can do. But that's a roster that your friend can administer for you. And that means you don't have to ask for help, because one of the things as women who've never had a baby, you've probably never really had to reach out and ask for help at a very vulnerable time, or you've had you might have gone to your healthcare or your psychologist or talked to your mum, but to actually work out what you need and what you know get some meals in the freezer, set up deliveries for supermarket or health food shops or whatever. Just set up those online deliveries so that life is going to be a little bit easier for you, because I think it's like being, it's like a train coming through your house. You don't know what sort of baby you're going to have. You don't know how well you're going to feel afterwards. And the other thing is to prepare for feeding your baby. Get the information around breastfeeding before you have that baby. See a lactation consultant antenatally. Talk to your midwife antenatally about how you plan to feed your baby and what would be helpful, and that they can go through a medical history with you and make sure that, whatever's happened before, if it's your first baby or your second baby, what's happened before, what was your journey like, did you have good breast development during puberty or pregnancy, or have you not had much? Can you express colostrum before you have your baby? That is the early sticky yellowish fluid that comes out of your breast. Usually mid to late pregnancy, you'll start leaking. Some women don't start leaking, and that's not an indicator of how your milk supply is going to be. But if you can get some syringes from your pharmacy, and they're probably about 50 cents each, and pop them in a little Ziploc bag, warm your breasts and gently express a little bit of that colostrum, suck it into a syringe and pop those syringes into the freezer. And you've got that, take it into hospital with you, because if for some reason your milk's a little bit slower coming in, which it may be, it doesn't mean it's never going to come in at all. But if you've had a C-section or you've got diabetes, there's a few little reasons that may mean that your milk's slower to come in. And somebody might be offering your baby formula, which isn't ideal, because the colostrum will seal your baby's gut and help get a good gut environment if you can do that. So, expressing colostrum before you're pregnant. But again, I think setting up your nest is the big one. Set up a feeding basket so that you've got all the things in it you need in this basket, because you'll be stuck on the couch for quite a while as your baby's learning to feed. And yes, you're laughing at me, Karen. You've got memories of sitting stuck on that couch, haven't
It's
you?
such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes,
You
I'm
put
so grateful for the person who told me about the feeding basket, because it's so important to have everything you need in one spot, because you sit down, and
and
you're
then you
with this
go,
baby for a long
yeah.
time, 40 minutes or something or more, and you can't get up.
And pee first before you sit down and feed that baby. Because you'll be stuck
Yeah,
on that couch. So if you've got
exactly.
the basket, and put snacks in your basket, a water bottle, some wipes, some breast pads, anything that you think you might need while you're stuck there, because yeah, and you can gradually, you can refill it at some other time of the day. You can just do this, but you might want to sit outside and feed your baby if it's a sunny day, or if you've got a
Mm.
toddler, you might want to sit outside and let that toddler play with water. They might wash their ride on with some soapy bubbles or something like that to keep them busy while you're stuck with this baby. Or they might just sit in the sandpit, or they might have a paintbrush and water and paint your veranda or your fence. Like there's activities you can do with your toddler. But if you've got that feeding basket, you can go to the playroom, you can sit in the lounge room, you can sit on your bed, wherever you are. You just pick up your basket, or you might have a basket in a few different rooms so that you've just got your stuff. Chuck a nappy in and a spare onesie too, because they're bound to have a poo explosion as you're feeding. And these are the things you don't think of if you've never had a
And
baby.
those towels.
Those towels, yes.
Exactly. Those towels, those white towels that are those old cloth nappies that you just go through so many.
I
They're the
bought
best
my
things.
first daughter up. I've got two daughters who've had babies. Um, and my first daughter, I bought her a dozen of those terry toweling squares. And she looked at me
Yeah.
like, "What? I'm not putting these on my baby." She thought I'd given them to her as nappies. I said, "You may not use them as nappies, but you will use these terry toweling squares, mark my words," kind of thing. And the night she was in labour, her husband rang me up and said, I said, "What are you telling me?" Because I'd said to her, "Look, if you want me to come, I'll come. If you don't, I'm not going to be offended. Just decide at the time, whatever you need." And he said, "No, she wants you to come." And I said, "Look, put her in a bath," because he said, "Look, she's pretty uncomfortable." And I said, "Look, put her in a bath with the lights off." Anyway, I took my bucket and my rubber gloves. And when I got there, I said, "Where are those cloth nappies?" And she told me, and I went and got them, put them in the bucket of hot water, wrung them out, and put them across her back because she was leaning over the bath, vomiting herself into a
Amazing.
bucket, so and she just went, "Ah,"
Oh,
because that heat, the heat helps, doesn't it? The heat, the warm, wet, wrung out
oh, it's
nappies
so good.
just helped because you can't put a
Yeah,
wet pack on when you're in the bath. But anyway, when my next daughter was
yeah.
pregnant many years later, she had her baby last year in full lockdown in Dubai. What did my older daughter send her? She sent her a bundle of the Colostrum terry toweling nappies and said, and of course she said, and
I
you
feel
will
that.
use these, not necessarily on your baby's bum. So
It's
don't
one of the
forget the
top
terry
10 things
toweling
I would
nappies.
definitely tell
A mum,
a
yeah.
pregnant woman, definitely.
But they'll look at you as
And heading
though,
back
"What,
to
you
the
think I'm gonna
colostrum.
use these?"
Yeah. The
Yeah.
colostrum, I think, is a really important one to bring up because uh, there are things that you just assume everyone gets told. And
Mm.
colostrum is one of those things that you would just hope a lot of pregnant women get told about. And not everybody does.
No,
And I think
no.
it's so important to have that information. And I think it's so funny too because when you're expressing and trying to do it, you're getting like literally drop after drop, maybe like it's
Yes, it's not
gold.
going to squirt out like milk.
No,
No,
it's
you're gonna get
actual gold.
adolescents sometimes.
And my husband, so I ended up doing it into a tiny little cup rather than
Yep.
doing it straight into the syringe, and then I would syringe it up and then I would put it in the freezer. And there was a moment where my husband was helping me and he had done it and he was just getting this last little bit out of the cup, and I think he had it tipped over, just waiting for it to drop out, and then everything just spilled everywhere, and I went, what have you done?
Yeah, it's
Because it's like
precious.
that just took me so long. Yeah, and it is. It's so precious. And the funny thing is, you might say it in my birth story, but we took everything that we needed when we went to the hospital. And we had all the colostrum, the frozen syringes, all in this pack. We went to the hospital, got checked, and then we ended up coming home because it was in the afternoon. Came home and progressed through my labor. 9 o'clock at night, we get everything in the car and we go. And we had our beautiful baby boy a couple of hours later. And then I needed to be rushed off down to theatre because I had a 3B tear. And so the colostrum was the number one thing that we needed. Where was it? It was in our freezer back at home. We'd
Oh,
forgotten to
no.
bring all the colostrum. And we said that to the midwife and we're like, what can we do? And she goes, it'd be really good if someone would go get it for you right now. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so, my in-laws ended up being able to bring it through to us. But it's just that thing. It's even if in those, post birth, you may not be able to immediate, like I got to give Max a little bit of expressed colostrum when I was there before I got rushed off, but that was really important. And
Yes.
even for C-section, those sort of things, it's you
You
don't think
just
about
don't
that.
know, do you, whether you'll be separated for a couple of hours or whether
Mm,
your milk will be a little bit slower to come in if there's a bit of intervention, if you have a bit of a bleed or all those there are little things that can make a bit of a delay till your milk comes in, and if that baby needs something, or if you've had diabetes and the baby's blood sugar drops, because they'll be monitoring that. I mean, they can give them a glucose drip or something, but if they can give them colostrum, that's so
yes.
easy.
So important. Actually, you know what? I think that was the first time I ever heard about it was from a woman who had had gestational diabetes. And she was like, make sure she was an advocate for it because she's like, I needed it. And it was 100%, really told to her. But yeah, not necessarily every single pregnant woman in the world.
Mm,
Yeah, good.
yeah.
And I think that then, preparing, whether you choose to, or whether breastfeeding is the journey that ends up for you or not, I think getting the information and being surrounded by those resources is really important because in those first days and even weeks, it's really hard, isn't it? Like there seems to be so much information, and if you're
And there can
stressed
be,
about
and
it,
your brain isn't in a position to really
mm,
sift through information, or you might be on some pain relieving meds that make you a little bit foggy brained, or you might just be exhausted. And so it's
mm,
very, very hard. Another thing I tell mothers is to learn the stop sign. Just putting your hand up in a stop sign, because it's very common for a midwife to come along and grab your baby and grab your breast and pop the two together. She's meaning well, but sometimes they ask permission, sometimes they don't. They're a bit busy, and everybody should ask permission before they touch your body, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So if you see someone coming to you like that and they've grabbed your breast, put your hand up in the stop sign and say, please, because you can't always get your words out either, and just say, please, can I try
mm.
myself? Would you just guide me? Rather than, being
That
that passive person, because when that midwife walks away, you're going to still be confused as to how did I get that baby on?
And that's a big thing, isn't it? Because
Mm.
if, talking about cracked nipples, and it doesn't always have to be if the attachment is really good. I mean, look, I'm not the expert, you are.
No, but most babies, unmedicated newborns can generally, if you actually Google breast crawl on
Yes,
YouTube,
amazing.
you'll see
So
a little
cool.
baby, a newborn with all their reflexes intact, and they will crawl up that mother's body and actually latch on. And the way they're doing it, the mum's lying back, the baby's coming to her, his chin's forward, he gets a naturally good latch. So sometimes the less
Mm,
interference, the better the baby does latch. And if you have any worries and concerns, get someone to have a look for you. If your nipple comes out and it looks like it's been squashed like the pointy end of a new lipstick, or your nipples feel sore, often they do feel a bit tender. It's something that you've not done before. So often they are a bit tender. But if you feel that things are sore or you're at all worried, get someone to have a look and ask. If you're in a hospital, ask if there's a lactation consultant who can come and see you, because they actually have extra training in breastfeeding. Um, beyond, I mean, an experienced
yeah.
midwife probably has too, but it's beyond what generally midwives are learning. So, ask if they have a lactation consultant on staff who can help you.
So good. And I got told about like the roof of your mouth. So you've got the hard bit at the front, at the top of your roof of your mouth, and then towards the back, it's softer, and
Yep.
that's where you're sort of aiming. So it's not nipple feeding; it's breastfeeding.
And the
So
baby, yeah, the baby will draw that nipple in, stretch it right up to between that hard and soft palate, up to the back of their mouth. Their chin needs to be, in deep underneath the breast. And of course, there'll be a little bit of stretching. Of course, it'll feel a bit different for, as you get used to those sensations. Yeah, but it does. The baby needs to slurp that nipple right in and not just suck on the end of your nipple, because that will hurt.
one thing I did, yes, it would, yes. One thing I did not expect, I did not expect it to feel good. Because I didn't, that let down feeling, like that rush of oxytocin. It's like this buzz almost. For me, it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it to feel so good. And I thought that's so interesting. But I know obviously if it's painful for women, then that like almost tension and feeling of fear or
It can
stress
inhibit
about
that
it.
flow of the stress, can inhibit that flow of oxytocin, and I think that's why also
Yeah.
you need to have a calm nest in a calm space so that there is more chance for this oxytocin. But yes, that feeling good. I mean, it's almost like a post-orgasmic type of relaxation feeling, isn't it? That after that
Yeah.
letdown, it's
It
yeah.
really is. So
It's quite a
amazing what the
lovely,
woman's
yeah, and
body and
I guess the world, Mother Nature, whoever, God, whatever you wanna call it, they've made it so that our babies survive, so breastfeeding is meant to be a comfortable, pleasurable experience when it's all going well. I mean, for some women, though, there is a little bit of a mix up in their hormones, and some women actually find when they have that letdown, they have um, a bit of a sick sort of feeling. They don't feel comfortable, but that does last for a very
Okay.
short time. It's called dysphoric milk ejection reflex, and it's not common, but just in case that happens, it's not something that's going to, um, last forever or anything. But it can be uncomfortable for some women, but that's rare. Generally, it's this lovely, pleasant,
One thing
very
I
relaxed,
found.
and some women think they feel tired when they're breastfeeding, but it's actually more of a relaxation response.
Mm, yeah, well, I think you sort of feel tired for a
You're
while,
tired because you're a
regardless as
mother,
in.
because 'cause you're having disturbed sleep, and also you've got that
Yeah.
vigilance that you have with a baby. When you've given birth, that pituitary, that little gland at the base of your brain, it's double its normal size for about 6 months, and it's churning out these hormones that are making you super protective and aware of your baby, and it's about, they call it the chemistry of attachment, but it's about, you know, you're being programmed to respond to your baby, and I think this is where people outside of you can say, "Oh, that's just a hungry cry," "Oh, that's just an angry cry," or, they'll just say, "Oh, that's just a grizzle." Trust yourself around, whatever noises your baby makes. And by staying in proximity to that baby, and watching your baby, you will learn all their little cues long before they even cry.
It's so amazing. I often look at Max, who's now, 18 months, and I think, you were inside me, you were a part of me, and we've got this incredible bond that nobody else could ever have because we've just,
He's
he's
your
grown together
child.
with me. And
Yeah.
I think it's such a gift, such a gift.
It is, isn't it? And I think I actually did a TED talk and I called it "Surrender's Not a Dirty Word." And
Yes.
surrender is really like, I think we've got all this programming to be busy, to achieve, to be productive, and we're sitting on the couch cuddling our baby and gazing into his eyes and or her eyes, and we're just in this zen zone. And then there's this pressure that we should be doing things, or we should be watching the clock, or we should be, I don't know, sleep training, whatever we should be doing. I think don't let anybody should on you. Just surrender to those beautiful feelings for now.
I agree. And I think that's one thing. Obviously, I teach pregnant women and new mothers. And before I had Max, I was teaching live classes. And so the mums and bubs classes, I'd be just chatting away, getting all of their different, tips and things. And I'd put a question out and see what the response was. And I think it was just so interesting to hear all of the feedback, and particularly about those first few weeks, and that so many people are like, "Oh, it's so, you have to get up all the time," and blah, blah. There was all of these negative comments. Anyway, so I went into it thinking, wow, this is going to be really hard. Like, this is going to be the worst. It was such an amazing time for me. And I think one of those reasons was because I gave myself complete permission to switch off to everything else. And I'm talking everything. Like, I didn't need to go near my phone. I didn't need to prepare any meals. My husband was incredible. He just did everything like that. My role in myself was to just be with my baby and just to feed my baby and nurture and cuddle. And because I gave myself that permission to surrender, as you've just said, the oxytocin flowed in. I just felt good. Yeah, I was up regularly, but it didn't bother me. And I knew it was such a short period of time overall. But I feel like if you put in those expectations on making sure, you've put up recent photos of your baby onto social media and making sure that you've texted everybody that you need. I think we took a week or more to tell it's just take
Yes,
your
you don't
time.
have to. Take your time and just stay in the bubble as long as you can. And that's it. If you've got those meals in the freezer, or whether they've
Mm.
been home cooked, or whether you've had a meal delivery service, or whatever you need to do, if your partner can cook, or, that's lucky you that you had a partner that cooked. But it's really important to just relax in that bubble and keep that oxytocin up. Because once you start fighting that and
100%.
you start to spiral into stress hormones, and then you get conflicted around what you should be doing and who should be visiting or who should be not. And the visitors, you can limit them, or you can um, have an expectation that they will bring food or they will be helpful and they will leave very quickly. And if you've got a partner there, maybe they can talk to, you know, it's time to go, or she's sleeping right now. And you and the baby might be just resting quietly in your bedroom, having a nice feed, or just some quiet time, whatever you need to do. And it's your home, it's your sanctuary. It's up to you to work it out. And some people feel like having visitors, they want to share their baby with their relatives or friends. Other people don't. They'd rather just stay quiet. But like you say, the phones, the photos, the obligation to be on
Yeah.
social media telling people how you feel and what your baby looks like, or the obligation to look fabulous straight after you've given birth. You don't even have to get dressed. In fact, stay in your pajamas would be another hint, because if people do turn up and
Or
you're in your pajamas, they probably won't stay as long,
or
or
topless.
topless. Who hasn't answered the door topless? Yeah, those sort of things. And I mean, if people are coming, maybe get the chopping board out and throw a pumpkin and some vegetables on the bench, and say, look, I was just going to do the vegetables, but, I'll sit and they'll go, oh, I'll do that for you.
That's a great idea. Definitely. And yeah, accepting that help is hard. It definitely it seems easy in theory, but when someone says, "Oh, is there anything I can do?" It's natural to say, "No, no,
It's
all
all
good." But
fine.
yeah, just having and being specific is good, isn't it? Like
Yes.
if you could just
Yeah.
do this.
If you could just do the dishes for me, that would be really helpful. But maybe do a
Yeah,
list before you have your baby of things that people might be
that's
able to
another
help
point.
you with. It might be
Yeah.
helpful to have a list and just say, look, there's a list on the fridge, you can pick one. It's
Perfect.
hard
And
though, isn't
that's
it?
a
It's
really
hard
good
though, but
it is hard.
people want to help. They don't want to just necessarily come and, well, if they're the kind of people who come and sit down while you make them cups of tea, just remember not to invite them back again.
Yeah. That's so true. So, when newborn phase, obviously newborns cry, and it
Really?
can be
Yes, they do.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's their communication, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they'll do a few squirms and a few wriggles, and sometimes you'll know what those mean, and other times it means, I've got a bellyache now and it's really hurting me, or it might be just be, I'm adapting to this new world. Because when you think about it, that they've been all snuggled up in a nice warm womb and rocked constantly, and it's been semi dark for them, and now they've got bright lights and they've got hot and cold and noise that, the noise was muffled before they were born. Now, of course, they could hear, but, life has changed a lot. And I always sort of say, think about womb service. What would recreate that womby environment for them? And maybe, it's controversial now whether you wrap your baby or not, but, you can certainly wrap your baby, cuddle them, lots of skin to skin, even if you're just lying back or sitting in a chair with them skin
Mm.
to skin. Even that helps them to calm. Or if you're walking around, you can use a baby carrier or a sling or a wrap to, wear your baby. That can be helpful. Yeah, so that movement. So I sort of think warmth, keeping them nice and warm in the water, putting them in a deep warm bath, and hop in a bath with them if you're not bleeding a lot and all that sort of thing, or put them in the bath with a partner and, float them in a nice deep warm bath and just recreate that womby sort of feeling for them. But the warmth and the water and the womb
Mm.
sounds, you can hold your baby and just gently bounce on a football and hum. Because if you're getting anxious about your baby crying, your breaths are getting shorter, you're getting more stress, those stress hormones are coming up. Humming will slow your breath. So if you're walking around and humming, or you're sitting on a football and humming, or in a rocking chair and humming, that will slow your breathing, and that will help, help calm you, which will then give you a bit of space to even think, look, what might be going on for my baby.
That's so nice. I wanna be there right now. I feel like that's such a
Being all
nice
snuggled up
space,
and
isn't it? You've
wrapped
just
in warmth and
created this
yeah,
bubble of warmth and coziness and yeah, if you're calm, it helps your baby. I remember I had my baby when a friend was very close in her due date too, and so we'd call each other and be like, "Oh, how's this going? What's this?" And I would say I'd actually count. I'd count like if my baby was crying while, changing nappy or whatever it was, I would just count in a low, like relaxed voice. And yeah, it might have helped my baby, but it actually helped me.
yeah, and I think you're the important one, to calm
Yeah.
down, and then you can be in charge of whatever needs to be done, because as soon as you undress them to change their nappy or you undress them to bath them, they don't like that. That's a new
Mm,
sensation for them, isn't it? Or they have that startle reflex and their little arms flick up in the air and that frightens them. So there's just all these tiny little things that they're adjusting to, and it's not necessarily something terribly wrong with them. But as the mother of a newborn who can't tell you what's upsetting them, what do you do? And, another thing about the feeding, if in doubt, flop it out. You don't have to worry about the clock. You might have just fed your baby, but they might have popped out a wind bubble and, then they've got a bit more of a gap in their tummy. And so they're ready to have another little suck, and the sucking will calm them down anyway. So, often it's not about whether you've got a good milk supply or anything like that. It's just this baby, or you might have done a poo and his tummy feels a bit funny, but that will settle him down. So, the skin to skin or popping back on the boob for comfort. But, the counting's good because your counting is slowing you down. And even if you're taking deep breaths and saying, I'm
mm,
breathing in, I'm breathing out, that's sort of slowing your breath too. Because it's about keeping us calm. It's it's important because
yeah.
you can get more and more and more anxious and upset, and that vicious spiral where the baby doesn't even know why he was crying in the first place, and you're so stressed about not being able to help him calm down that everybody's upset. And you will cry, won't you? You will cry when you've got a
Yes.
newborn.
Yes.
I think those are the things people don't
Yes.
tell
Just for
you.
no reason.
Yeah, you can just cry. And the other thing is when you're having a shower, your baby might have been sound asleep and you
Mm.
decide you'll hop in the shower and you hear that baby crying. So you race out of that shower, you haven't put the shampoo on your hair, but it's wet, all that, and the baby's still sound asleep where he was, right where you left him. So you just
You're so right.
you just hear that baby crying as soon as
You
you start to
you
do
hear
something
these
else. And
things.
it's again, it's that hypervigilance that mothers have. That those that mummy margarita of hormones, I think, that keep you connected to your baby. And the minute you sort of break that connection in your own head, baby's fine, but you're hearing that baby cry. So I think there's some things that people they don't really warn you about, those strange little things, do they?
Yeah, it's funny. I woke very easily to Max crying overnight, every time. Like that was
You
fine.
do.
And then
Yeah.
there was a moment I kind of remember how old he was. It was well into 8 months or whatever it was. And he would sleep overnight, and he didn't need a feed overnight. And it was literally like the day that he stopped needing a feed overnight I would just sleep. And if he cried, it was my husband that heard him. And it was so interesting because it was almost like this innate, I'm not needed anymore. In
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
was so interesting that it just flipped. And, my husband would be like waking me up, like, can you hear him? Oh, what? No. And it was just so funny. On that note, so sleeping, I think that a lot of new parents have this stress about I'm going to lose my sleep, and am I going to have a baby or a toddler that doesn't sleep well? And there's almost that pressure early on to get them into some
Mm.
sort of routine because it's like predictable, and babies are the most unpredictable things ever.
They are,
Ever.
and really you can't control. I think this. the more you go with your newborn baby, because you're establishing your milk supply, and women have different breast milk storage capacities. So, I would say don't worry about it. Some of us have got shot glasses, some of you will have jugs, and it's not necessarily to do with the size of your breasts either. It's to do with that milk storage capacity. So, some babies will need feeding quite frequently, other babies will take longer between feeds, but your newborn stomach is about the size of a little marble and it gets up to about the size of a golf ball after about 10 days. And so that baby will need frequent refills in the early days. So trying to pop a newborn into a 3 or 4 hourly routine, with some books advise, is really going to mess with your milk supply. And there's more breast development in that first 6 to 8 weeks anyway. So by feeding your baby when they need to and frequently, they will get into a rhythm much sooner, and you'll be establishing a higher set point for your milk supply. So that baby will then be able to go longer between feeds, once his tummy's big enough. So watching your baby, not the clock, is so important. And you don't, sleep training when they're very little is not going to make, sleep. I'm anti-sleep training at any time when it involves leaving babies to cry. There are certainly things you can do to help your baby sleep, a little bit better or more sounder or whatever, but it all has to be biologically safe. And I say, when you get any advice, you filter it by saying, is it safe? Is it respectful? And that means, is it respectful to my baby? And does it feel right for me? Because when you leave a baby to cry and you don't attend to them, it generally upsets most parents, and certainly the mothers who are, they've grown that baby in their belly, they're hormonally connected to that baby, whether or not they're breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, of course you will be, but we know it doesn't matter. You're still biologically connected to your baby, and this is where all this advice to train your baby. And when you start spacing out those feeds, your breasts aren't getting the message to produce milk, because, the more milk you remove from your breast, the more your body's signal to make. So you're not getting that signal. So then by about 2 to 3 months, often that milk supply has dwindled even sooner than that. And it's because those breasts aren't getting enough stimulation, that baby's not being responded to. And when you think of a small baby, they need lots of touch and they need responsive interactions for their brain connections to grow. So if you're denying them that touch by trying to make them sleep longer at night or at any time, they're getting less touch, less stimulation for their brain. They may not be getting as much food as they need. So, really optimum, like you say, stay in that bubble and surrender for those first at least 6 to 8 weeks. But, I always think of that fourth trimester, which is what you're talking about, isn't it? That first 3 months. And very often, if that baby's feeling lovely and secure, your milk supply's good, you're starting to feel really good by about 3 months, somewhere around the 3 to 4 month mark. And you can do it sooner. You can pop that baby into bed. He's got a nice full tummy. You can pop him into bed and he may just babble away to himself and fall asleep. There's no right or wrong. And other babies will need help to go to sleep for a lot longer. And when you think about it, you would read your 3-year-old a bedtime story and help him calm his busy brain and calm his limbs so that he could fall asleep. And why wouldn't you do it with a 3-month-old? There's so much pressure around having a baby that self-settles. And you think about how we go to sleep. If we were all snuggled up to our partner and then all of a sudden we're just dozing off and they say to us, get over your own side of the bed. You need to self-settle. We're creating bad habits. You just go, how stupid would that be?
It's funny you say that, because I work a lot with, even in health coaching, I've worked with a lot of people in helping their sleep as adults. And just things as simple as, and I think it's simple because it just makes sense to me, but the bright lights, the TV, the
Yes.
screens, all of these things tell your brain that it's midday. And obviously, midday doesn't mean bother babies and time of day, but say an example, midday. And so then to be able to go, okay, lights off, go to bed, bang. It's
It doesn't
hard. And
work. We need our screens off an hour before we go to sleep. So you
yeah,
sort of think a baby that's, feeling quite stimulated by life because they're little and their brains are new and they're developing all these connections. Most of them will need some rocking or some cuddling or perhaps a feed or some sucking or something like that, just to help them calm that brain and body. and they've got a startle reflex for the first few months anyway, that to actually be able to calm their bodies and their little brains down to go down those levels of sleep into a nice deep sleep, it's going to take some help, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, so we have
Amazing.
big
You're amazing.
expectations of little babies that are immature, that don't have the brain capacity to think, "Oh, I must go to sleep now. I'll shut my eyes and sleep." I mean, I have a busy brain at night. I think it's like a conference call going on in my brain as I try to go to sleep. And I will put on a meditation on my phone, and pop my earplugs in, and that will help me. Sometimes I'm so busy with the brain that the meditation's going on in the background. I just, that it is difficult. And if you are awake in the night and you're not going back to sleep after feeds, yeah, but that oxytocin again, if you do night feeds, your baby is getting extra chemistry that's going to help his brain development. Those night feeds are very high in melatonin, which helps your baby go back to sleep easily. That's your sleep inducing hormone that the baby doesn't produce himself till about 4 months. Um, it's also very rich in tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin. So you're helping your baby develop good, healthy stocks of serotonin receptors in his brain. And that's important for lifelong well-being, that you have that serotonin receptors developing in your brain. So, it's important that you don't cut out night feeds before your baby's ready. Of course, if your baby's waking every hour and he's a few months old, and, you might want to look into what might be happening. And sometimes it's just because babies are so distracted during the day that they do the night feeds. They get into a bit of a reverse cycle. Sometimes there's just little simple things that you can change. But, those early newborn days are not the time to make those big changes, but to work with how you can get rest and how you can get sleep. Can your partner um, sit up and hold that baby while you pop off to bed early and have a couple of hours sleep? Could you have a nap during the day? Um, there are lots of ways you can actually fill up your own sleep and rest bank.
Exactly. We just did a podcast with psychologist Rebecca Black all about those micro moments, having some downtime in the day or at night or wherever you need to, especially in those newborn days. It's don't worry that it's only 7 p.m. at night and you're thinking, oh, I can't go to sleep now. It's like, well, you're probably going to be up several times, so have an hour here,
Yeah,
have maybe, have what you can, take what you can, and from a body perspective, being horizontal is so important to recover your pelvic floor into your body, because you've gone through the pregnancy and the birth. So
it
just
is, isn't it?
permission
I hadn't thought of that.
to
Yes, but
relax.
lying down to feed is another one too. If you learn to breastfeed lying
That's
down.
so important. That's what I did, for majority of the feeds when I could, and I was telling somebody, and they're like, "What? I never got told that. I never heard about that." I'm like, "What? Yes, this
Yeah.
is so good.
Yeah.
This
No,
has
I've
saved
found as
me."
a lactation consultant, a lot of women have said to me, "Tell me how I lie down to feed," and they actually haven't figured it out. Whereas if you've got your baby in a nice little cradle hold, that baby's there. You can lie on your side, or you can put your hand up like that and have the baby lie next to you just to feed. And even if you're just lying back with cushions and that baby on your chest as they're feeding, but to be lying down and feed is, I don't know, it's just so easy. Often you'll need two pillows under, from shoulder to head, so you might feel a little bit uncomfortable if you're trying to lie flat on your side. So you might need two pillows, and then you've got your baby in the crook of your arm. And, even if you do doze off, your knees will be bent. The baby won't shoot down the bed. You don't need to put blankets over you. You can if you like. But, though, just to lie down and feed, whether you doze off or you don't, it just makes such a difference. And even if you're just, lying on your bed and resting, it still makes a difference. And like you
Mm,
say, with the pelvic floor, you're not putting that pressure on it. You're giving your body a rest.
so important. Thank you so much, Pinky. So many incredible tips there for pregnant women going into this motherhood, but also new mothers, and hopefully feeling a little bit more relaxed about it all, because there's so many things that you read and you hear, and it can be quite consuming, but definitely coming back to that innate feeling and trusting in yourself is huge.
Trusting yourself and trusting your body and trusting your baby, you've got it. And it doesn't have to be that hard. I think once you put on your thinking brain rather than your feeling body, then you start to come up with doubts and questions and things that just perseverate in your brain, don't they? Where if you can switch off and know that you actually have got this, you'll be okay.
And that it's not just a straight line up.
No
It's
way.
a roller coaster ride
Too
for
forward,
a
too
while
backwards.
too.
And the night your baby sleeps a few hours longer and you think or he sleeps at night instead of in the day, because they have reverse cycle at first, don't they? They don't know day from night. And you think, I'll do exactly the same thing as I did yesterday and my baby will be in this pattern. And you walk around the block in the same direction, or you eat the same, you eat your cup of tea at the same time of day or whatever. And you'll bath him at the same time of day and you'll put him in the same kind of pajamas and then he'll still wake up. So, you have ups and downs and ups and
I
downs.
love that.
But it's the
Yeah,
frustration
that's, I
and
think,
the
attachment. Don't get
disappointment.
attached.
No, no, invested but not
Yeah,
attached.
don't have yes,
There's
exactly. Beautiful.
expectations.
Well, thank you again so
Yeah,
much for your time.
thank you for having me.
Some really good, valid tips there from Pinky. An expert in this field, has helped so many mamas, and hopefully those tips can help you. For more information on this podcast, head over to pregactive.com for the show notes.